The Vengeance of the Witchfinder by John Bellairs and Brad Strickland. Chapter 4. Louis lay in the dark. He could not sleep. Whenever he closed his eyes, he saw before him the drawing on the paper. He imagined himself hovering in the air above the hedge maze and looking straight down, except that now Louis knew something about the maze that he had not known before, perhaps something that no one had known for hundreds of years. He thought about the map, which he had carefully replaced in the book. Maybe Martin Barnevelt's son had drawn it himself, leaving a chart for future members of the family to find. Something told Louis it was a kind of treasure map. Someone had hidden something valuable away at the center of the maze, and maybe no one had found it in 300 years. The thing to do, he told himself, is to wait until tomorrow and let Cousin Pelly know all about it. That would be the sensible course. Still, what would Sherlock Holmes do? Why, he would rise, dress, take his dark lantern, and rouse Watson. "The game's afoot," he would whisper. Then the two of them would set out on a new adventure. They would solve the mystery themselves, and at breakfast, Holmes would dramatically present Cousin Pelly with the solution to the puzzle. Louis remembered how Holmes had made a big production out of returning the stolen papers in the adventure of the naval treaty. The detective had served the papers up at breakfast, hidden in a covered dish that was supposed to contain eggs. Louis smiled at the memory of the happy uproar that had caused. If only he could do something like that. Unfortunately, Louis was timid. As he thought about venturing into the maze, he could picture all kinds of disasters that might happen. He could get lost. He could fall into a deep pit in the center of the maze and starve to death there. He could catch pneumonia from the damp evening air. Louis sighed. This was the curse of having a strong, active imagination. He always used it to look on the dark side. It was a part of himself that he did not like very much. Well, maybe this was an opportunity to do something about it. Slowly he felt himself gathering all his courage. If Rosrita were here, he thought, she would be out there in the maze right now. Rosrita wasn't afraid of anything. Then he remembered that Rosrita was afraid of a few things. Things like tunnels, for instance. That made him feel a little better, a little braver, because he could take tunnels. For a long time, Louis lay there debating with himself. He heard a clock somewhere in the house strike 12, the witching hour, except that brave people like Sherlock Holmes wouldn't believe in witching hours. Lying there in the darkness, Louis made his mind up. Just this once he would be brave, and maybe, if he could be brave this once, then the next time it would be easier. He slipped out of bed. Before they had left for their trip, Uncle Jonathan had supervised planning and packing. Jonathan had traveled enough to know that strange bedrooms bothered him. If he had to get up in the dark, he could never get his bearings, and would flounder around, knocking over furniture and running into walls. Once in Detroit, he had broken a hotel window because he was trying to find his way to the bathroom in the dark. To prevent similar accidents, Jonathan had bought 2 small chrome-plated flashlights, one for himself and one for Louis, and he had advised Louis always to put the flashlight under his pillow, which was where it was right now. Louis took it out and turned it on for the first time. The batteries and bulb were fairly fresh, and the flashlight shot out a bright beam of light. It wasn't exactly a dark lantern like the one Sherlock Holmes carried, but it was close enough. Louis set the flashlight on end, with the beam pointing up at the ceiling. That gave the room a dim illumination. It was bright enough for Louis to slip out of bed and dress himself. Then he dug through his suitcase until he found the writing pad he planned to use to write letters to Rosrita. He opened the book and pulled the map out. He used his mechanical pencil to copy the maze. Then he replaced the original, closed the book, and tore the copy out of his writing pad. Louis took a very deep breath. He pulled the Sherlock Holmes deerstalker onto his head for added courage. He picked up his flashlight and tiptoed out into the hall. Now the game really was afoot. Louis got downstairs all right, but there the hall looked different in the beam of his flashlight. He took a wrong turn and had to backtrack. He tripped on a loose corner of carpeting. Finally, though, Louis found his way outside. The night air was cool but clear. The stars shone brightly overhead. Crickets and frogs trilled and croaked. Louis resolutely started forward toward the hedge maze. He crossed the drive and felt a sudden chill of fear. He swallowed hard and hesitated. Sherlock Holmes wouldn't turn back. Well, neither would he. Lewis stepped into the unmown grass, now wet with dew, and walked on toward the maze. The legs of his corduroy trousers made whip-whip sounds that Lewis found surprisingly loud. Then something swished in the grass behind him. Lewis froze. He felt cold all over. The hair on his neck prickled. His heart thudded. Rustle, snap. There it was again. Something was coming after him. Lewis shrieked and ran. Behind him, footsteps began to pound. He turned his head back for the safety of the house and found himself in a grove of trees. He was going in the wrong direction, and something was gaining on him fast. "Lewis, is that you?" "Yes," he shouted. "Help! I'm coming." It was Bertie's voice. Bertie would save Lewis from the pursuer. He would. Lewis suddenly realized all the noise came from Bertie. "Oh, brother," he gasped. A second later, Bertie came blundering up, his face ghostly in the glow of the flashlight. "Hello, what's up?" asked Bertie. "You almost scared me to death," Lewis panted. His voice was shaking with fear, but he tried to make it sound angry instead. "Why did you sneak up on me like that?" Bertie's face fell. "I'm frightfully sorry. I heard you walking about in the hallway, and I got dressed and followed you." "You knew it was me?" asked Lewis. "How?" Bertie sounded puzzled. "Why, from the sound of your footsteps, of course. I've been hearing them all day. What time is it anyway? It's still quite dark, isn't it?" "It's midnight," said Lewis. He sighed. "I was going out on a sort of mission, but now I'm not so sure." "A mission?" asked Bertie. Tell me about it, do." Lewis bit his lip. He did not want to act like a coward in front of Bertie. "Well," he said, "it started with this book." He hastily told Bertie about the chapter in the book and the map to the maze he had found. "It looks like there is a secret place in the middle of the maze," he finished. "Or does everybody know about that already?" "No," said Bertie slowly. "Mr. Barneveld has talked about the maze from time to time. He's always meaning to have Jenkins trim it into shape, but he never gets around to it. I'm sure that Mr. Barneveld doesn't know about any secret inside the maze, and if he doesn't know, then no one does." His voice became excited and eager. "I say, I think you really have discovered something. Let's go together." When Lewis did not answer at once, Bertie added, "Come on, please, let me explore with you. I could be your Dr. Watson, and you could be Sherlock Holmes." That decided Lewis. "Very well," he said, trying to make his voice sound deep and brave. "I have my dark lantern with me. The game's afoot. Come along, Watson, and we shall unravel this mystery." Despite his misgivings, Lewis grinned. It felt great to be playing the role of the brave detective. Bertie led the way out of the grove of trees. Since he could hardly see anyway, it made no difference to him whether it was night or day. In a few minutes, the two friends stood at the entrance to the maze. They went inside. The leafy walls loomed all around them, green and impenetrable in the glow from the flashlight. Lewis studied the copy of the map as they made all the twists and turns. "What do you think it is?" asked Bertie after a minute or two. "The secret in the center, I mean." "I don't know," said Lewis. "It looks like a kind of hidden compartment. It's almost square, and it looks hollow. If the map is right, it should be about the size of a small room. It might be anything." "Treasure, perhaps?" asked Bertie in an excited tone. "Sure," said Lewis. "Why not? Maybe the Barnevelds hid their family valuables there when the Civil War broke out. We might find jewels and gold and silver. We could be rich." "I wish," began Bertie. He broke off and then said, "No, never mind." "What?" asked Lewis. They stopped at an intersection, and he was studying the map in the flashlight beam. Come on, Holmes and Watson don't keep secrets from each other." "Well, I wish we might find enough money so that I could travel to America," whispered Bertie. "My mum is saving so we can go there someday. The doctors here think that an operation could—" He broke off and sniffled. "Oh, what's the use?" Lewis's conscience gave him a twinge of regret. He had lain in the dark for hours trying to work up the courage to come out here. Bertie had been in the dark for years, and he had jumped at the chance to come out into the spooky maze at midnight. There was real bravery. Lewis cleared his throat. "An operation might let you see again?" "Yes," said Bertie. "It's chancy, though." "But you have to go to America for the operation, huh?" "Yes," said Bertie. You see, there are only a few surgeons in the world who would even try it. The best of them is a specialist in New York City, but it will take years and years to save up the money for the trip, and every year that I stay blind means the operation has a smaller chance of success. Lewis took a deep breath. Oh well, he thought, the maze isn't all that scary even at night. Not if there's a friend along. He clapped Bertie on the shoulder. Come along, Watson, he said. Perhaps we may find the answer to our problems at the center of the maze. The two friends plunged ahead, following the twisty course of the labyrinth. Before long, they stood in the narrow part of the maze before the mossy stone bench. All right, said Lewis. According to the map, the secret space is just behind this hedge. Now we have to find a way through. That proved easier said than done. The hedges grew very thick. Lewis could find no way to penetrate them. He and Bertie ranged all around the central square without success. Finally, they sat on the chilly stone bench and pondered. The flashlight batteries were beginning to weaken, and the beam of light was now a little yellowish. I guess the only way is to cut through the hedges, said Lewis with a sigh, and we'd better not do that. No, said Bertie, sounding disappointed. I don't believe Mr. Bonneville would like that. You think that the map would show a way in? You'd think that the map would show a way in. Lewis studied the map again. This time he noticed something he hadn't before. The little rectangle that represented the stone bench looked funny somehow. Lewis realized that the line showing the hedge passed right through it. Had the original been split that way, or had he made a mistake in copying? Lewis thought back. He was almost sure that his copy of the map was accurate. Still, what did it mean? The back of the bench was right against the hedge. It was impossible for the shrubbery to grow right through the middle of the bench. Unless, he thought, there was another bench just like this one inside the secret opening. Lewis jumped off the bench. Aha! He shouted. Now I have it. Bertie rose. What is it, Lewis? He asked. Lewis got on his hands and knees. Tall grass and weeds grew thickly in front of the bench. He pushed these away and shone his flashlight beam under the bench. He saw a dark opening. Here, he said. This is the way in. We have to crawl under the bench. Bertie groped, felt the edge of the seat, and dropped to his knees. I'll go first, he said. He crept out of sight. Lewis, left alone on his side of the bench, felt his heart racing. All his borrowed bravery had evaporated. The dark, narrow opening was like the jaws of death. Still, his stalwart friend had gone through. I say, Bertie called, there's a building or something in here. Lewis took a deep breath and drew on all his resolve. I'm coming, Watson, he said. Then he crawled beneath the bench and into the strange clearing at the heart of the maze. And that is the end of chapter 4.